All we know about the Batman Part 2 is that there's still a Batman Part 2. We don't really know a ton. We know that the Clayface movie has leapfrogged it, and it's expanded. Penguin, of course, was a massive success for this little thing. And again, keep all this separate from the Gunverse. And I've all said that the Matt Reeves part is all under contract. It's all locked in. It'll cost them more money than it would to just make the stuff that it would be to get out of those contracts. So I expect something to actually manifest at some point. Now, maybe not a third film, maybe not a third project, but at least the next one. This is an article that runs through some different scenarios about who the villains are. And I wanted to just give you my thoughts because there's different random rumors that kind of make sense. And kind of goes back to what my issue was with the first movie. And that is that Hush should have been the villain in the first movie all along. It makes more sense that the references were there, Thomas Elliot, all the things were there at the end. And they could have just had Riddler go, I'm not actually in charge. You thought I was in charge? Like, you need to play up prototype Batman. He doesn't totally know what he's doing. He's clumsily and erroneously running through all this detective stuff. And for the first time in his new career, the only couple years, it's completely been a disaster. Everyone has died. These are failure after failure. And he has to kind of readjust and recommit and then also face something so formidable as Hush. Totally would have worked out instead of having this weird YouTuber allegory, have him out into like, everyone can see him behaving more like Superman than Batman at the end of the first movie, but it leading into Hush would have made sense. And similarly, I'm actually surprised that we didn't also have sort of a Court of Owls reference, having something there that would have made some sense. And this is obviously some new 52 reference. They leaned into that so much. I'm not sure it paid off for them. So they may kind of move away from that. But having Hush being set up in the end of the first movie, then being a part of the second movie with the Court of Owls being behind the scenes, really would have made a lot of sense. But yeah, I don't know about that one either. I think that's kind of almost like a miss now. This has been the biggest one all along that everyone has kind of leaned into. There was an image that leaked very early on in the developmental process that kind of implied Mr. Freeze. Now, a real Mr. Freeze, a good Mr. Freeze would be very welcome because we didn't really get that. Obviously, this Arnold Schwarzenegger stuff was complete nonsense, completely laughable. There's been some decent things along the way. Obviously, Gotham had a version. The animated series, of course, elevated Mr. Freeze to being a top tier villain and could obviously hold his own. So, really would love to see that as a tragic villain story against all of this, to see Batman develop in his own. And then, of course, you have characters like Mad Hatter, which I don't see them even remotely leaning into this version at all right now. It could be something down the road, but I don't foresee that. Likewise, I also don't know about the ventriloquist. There's so many different versions of this, some more dark than others. Very tricky to know how to navigate the film. I don't feel like that's the Batman film part. He feels like he would be more interesting in one of the TV shows like Penguin, which is kind of a miss because they're not going to go back and revisit that. I don't know that he'd be a good fit for Clayface. It feels like in a TV for that would have been more sense. Of course, Poison Ivy is always on the table. It would seem kind of silly to have Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy, so I don't think we're going to see that again. Having Ivy alluded to or being in Arkham could be part of the scheme, but I don't think they're going to like spin their wheels there either. Moreover, Anarchy, which is kind of an interesting choice for them to put on the list, and actually it feels like a character that could just be an ancillary villain. Like I've always said that one of the things I would love to see about the opening sequence of the movie, kind of like a James Bond intro, is having him take out a villain, have him take someone down. Batman has this battle sequence. It's really cool. It shows where he's been. I think that the first movie sets up all that internal narration to the audience where you have it opening, you have a fight sequence, and then you have him heading back to the now Batcave, which is evolved and developed into something with this Batmobile. It's obviously evolved and it's developed into something. And he's like, I can't let my mistakes of the past catch up. We have to be better now, whatever. One more villain off the streets, that kind of thing. And of course, Hugo Strange, which again lends itself to being the other side of the probably the more interesting dynamic than Mr. Freeze would be if we got some Hugo Strange. But Gotham did a really good job with Hugo Strange. They really spent their time unpacking that over time. So if you really wanted some good Hugo Strange, I don't know if they can really kind of top that a lot. This is just a Bounty in a Comics article. It kind of goes through some of those different theories. I think I guess so you can just Google any theory. At this point, we don't know anything. I would have interwoven a lot of this better into the first film to have you know. I don't think we needed mystery. I don't think we needed that. We needed anticipation. I think the clues are there for Hush. And the fact that they didn't follow through on that. They had a Joker sequence in Arkham was silly. We don't need another Joker. We don't need more distractions. You already set up Penguin, Catwoman, some sort of infrastructure that's greater than the Riddler. I don't know why you didn't do it, why you don't need to. And I think that more evolution and more development from where the Pattinson version of Bruce and Batman were is really more important than anything else. So I think Hush slash Court of Owls would lend itself to that. I think the Mr. Freeze and the backstory of Victor and being a tragic villain story, first and foremost, would be the best scenario to allow some of the other stuff to kind of work because then it's focused on the villain. You have to have a great villain. If you have that working, then I think everything else can be ancillary and you can kind of set that up for a third movie rather than having to focus on two villains at the same time, which I think is just too much. We don't need that. We need a good Batman movie. We need a trained Batman. We need a Batman that learned from the mistakes of the first movie, all of his failures, not solving things in time, one disaster after another, not just embarrassment, beyond embarrassment, humiliation, a failure. This is compulsive, therapeutic way of him dealing with the tragedy murder of his parents. So the fact that so many people also died because he couldn't deliver his commitment works really well. I think Hugo Strange, the problem here is it's something that's sort of like under the surface. And maybe that feels the culmination of the third film where you have Hush and you have Court of Owls, maybe Hugo Strange. It feels like that all blends a lot better. Do you even have thoughts and hopes on a Batman 2? Do you even care? A lot of people are really mixed on the first Batman movie, and I am as well because I feel like it's only really sort of okay. Like there's still so many issues with it, especially that third act, that unless we stack and grow on it properly, then I don't feel like it will hold up well at all. Like if they don't acknowledge how bad he is at things and show an improvement or say, hey, let's fast forward 2 more years or 3 more years, whatever it is, we see him scaling up the Batmobile, the Bat Cave, all these different things. And it makes the first movie a glaring disaster, a horrible representation of Batman. So the second movie is really, really pivotal on how they handle this franchise. And then the mistake upon mistake is that the DC cannot figure out how to blend the universes together, not having this part of what's going on with Superman and all the other stuff the Gun's trying to do. I gotta be honest, I actually think at this point, it might actually make me more interested in the Superman story if we didn't have David Cornsweet in the second movie, but I know we will. But it would have been more interesting to say this Batman stuff has existed. It's just the dark underbelly, seedy place of Gotham. Like it's ugh, ugh. So that's why it feels and looks whatever. And it's such a mere contrast to what happened with Superman. We could see when they come together or that they could exist. I don't know. Because you're still saying at that point they're going to basically be in a Justice League movie together. I don't think we need to do that. I think you could just make references that they exist in the same universe and then being on screen together. So the Batman Part 2, what do you guys think? Do you think any of these villains are actually going to be the thing? Do you like any of my theories? What would you like to see or not see? Let me hear from you in those comments. So thanks for watching, everybody. I am Pops.